living with differences.
Well, no, that's precisely because of the Tocquevillian character that you and I, from different standpoints, have both
praised.
Best appreciation for.
Sure.
It's partly it's a social Christianity. Or not just Christianity either. It's a social form of religion. It takes part in charitable work and things of this kind. It's very largely, in fact, humanistic. Here's what I say when this comes up, and I've issued maybe it's too grand to call it a challenge, but here's a statement I make, and anyone in the next hour can call in and take me up on it. I haven't yet had an answer to this question. You only have to do the following. You have to name an ethical action performed or an ethical statement made by a religious person that could not have been made by a person of unbelief. Because it's not a defense of religion to say that it isn't all that religious or it isn't all that fanatical or that it's really just another form of humanism. I mean, in that case, I've won the argument, haven't I? People have recognized that they don't have a special revelation, that they don't have the right to preach an exclusive text.
I don't see that for a moment. Let me get back to that for a moment. I want to. There are several things you have on the table here.
Well, the challenge stands anyway, I hope. Anyone's entitled to try for my prize, and then I'll tell them what it is.
What your prize is?
No, yeah.
Okay, I'm sure it's a stake in the afterlife, in which you don't believe. But let us go back to this question of Dr. Falwell. As a person who, throughout the pages of your book, you do talk about ethics, and you deal with the old canard that atheists cannot be ethical, and I would never suggest that. Atheists can be ethical, atheists can be unethical. Religious people can be ethical, religious people can be unethical. But surely you would agree that part of what we expect in terms of ethics is kindness to our fellow human beings. And what the case that I would make to you, Christopher Hitchens, is that in terms of the reception to your book, which challenges the religious beliefs of hundreds of millions of Americans, that there has been a far more kind reaction evinced by ethical religious believers than the unkindness with which you responded to the death of Jerry Falwell, which is striking only because it shows such a lack of basic human respect on the day of a man's death.
Do I have to disagree with you again? I mean, Falwell and I are not equivalent in a number of ways. I think the main way is this. I never tried to tell him to do anything. I didn't try to impose my opinions on him. He tried to impose his opinions through the political process and through his religious fundraising, first as a campaigner for racial segregation in the South, second as a campaigner against the rights of homosexuals to lead their lives unmolested, third as someone who said that only people who believed with him were to be saved from a coming Holocaust, and people like him would be privileged and taken out of the cockpits of planes and out of cars and raptured. Admittedly, that doesn't influence me at all because it's pure and utter drivel, but it's not funny to teach that kind of thing to children who may not know that because it's coming from authority that it is such nonsense.
But you see,
it's very, very wicked to lie to children, and I hope you'll agree with me that lying is a sin to begin with.
I believe that, but I do not believe, as you do, that Jerry Falwell didn't believe in his own faith with every bit as much vigor and conviction that you have for your non-faith. And this is one of the other problems I have with your entire position. We'll get to callers in a moment. The suggestion that you somehow are less of an absolutist in your claims to truth than the likes of the late Reverend Falwell. We'll be right back with Christopher Hitchens and your calls, author of God Is Not Great.
More of Michael Medved in a moment.
21 minutes past the hour with Christopher Hitchens, author of God Is Not Great. If we can just back up for a moment, and then we'll go directly to your calls. Christopher, before the break, in the first segment, you were making charges against the Catholic Church. You had made the case that the Catholic Church, by its nature, supports nationalism. I had made the case that that in Catholicism, basically people become members of the same faith, regardless of their racial background, or their ethnic background, or their nationality. And then you brought up the question of anti-Semitism. Will you concede that that's basically moving the walnut shells with a P under it and trying to deceive people? Because the truth is the Catholic Church has always been very, very eager to accept Jewish despite a record of anti-Semitism, Jewish converts to Catholicism, like the current Archbishop of Paris, Cardinal Lustiger, and many others. So that the idea that the Catholic Church is by its nature racialist or nationalistic is an unfair criticism.
Well, no, not entirely. I mean, I'll restate my point if you like. Again, in reverse order. The Society of Jesus, for example, the Jesuits, until very recently, wouldn't admit anyone to membership who couldn't prove that they hadn't got a drop of Jewish blood going back at least 3 or 4 generations. And there were worse things than that.
What's your source on that?
There were worse things than that preached by the Church until very recently. But on your point about the idea of the Greek word Catholic meaning universal, it's true that the other Catholic churches, almost as big, the Eastern Orthodox, did after a while split, so that it became Russian Orthodox, Bulgarian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Macedonian Orthodox, and so forth, probably to its detriment. They became national and nationalistic churches. Cyprus Orthodox is another, Syrian
Right.
is another.
Agree.
The Roman Church has not done that exactly, but it has been very careful to establish local cults of saints who are of purely national value, like the Virgin of Czestochowa in Poland, or
the Virgin of Guadalupe in Mexico.
Indeed, I was about to say, in Mexico, without becoming openly configured just to support nationalism. It's careful to do that too, and you can't possibly go, or you couldn't in the old days, anyone quite recently, to Poland or to Ireland and not get the overwhelming impression that Jesus had been an Irishman or a Pole.
Let us go to Dennis in Los Angeles. Dennis, you're on the Michael Medved Show with Christopher Hitchens.
I think the basic underlying principle of Christianity, love your neighbor, is antithetical to violence. And during its inception, during the savage Roman Empire, it was a revolutionary idea. But this same concept is, I think, embedded in the Declaration of Independence and this idea of created equal. As Tocqueville said, created equal comes from the Bible. It means equal in the eyes of God. That is to say, God doesn't see a king like in King George III. He sees an individual stripped of all of his accoutrements, and he judges us accordingly, either good or bad. And that's what makes democracy work. This idea that we're good enough and wise enough for self-governance, and we're good enough and wise enough because we obey the Ten Commandments, and because we respect and love each other as we would have others love us.
Christopher?
I think that's as wrong as it could possibly be. It's actually wrong also in point of fact. First, the idea that we should love our neighbor we don't owe at all to Christianity. It's most famously stated by Rabbi Hillel, Babylonian rabbi, who involved the Golden Rule.
Well, it's most famously stated in the book of Leviticus.
Similar thoughts can be found in the Analects of Confucius and in innumerable pre-Christian texts. It's part of our evolution that we learn that we have to have human and social solidarity, or we will not survive. It doesn't need